The lights flickered across the Grand Hall of Concord Station as Ambassador Talia Volkov struggled to maintain her diplomatic composure. The power disruption had affected nearly a quarter of the massive space station, interrupting the solemn ceremonies commemorating the Galactic Concord's millennium of existence. Around her, representatives of hundreds of species reacted with varying degrees of distress, some with multiple respiratory cycles in rapid succession, others with extended appendages vibrating in agitation, and a few emitting high-frequency sounds of alarm. "An unfortunate accident," she said, her voice steady despite the tension coiling within her. The experimental energy conversion system was properly registered with the Science Division. Registered but not fully vetted, interrupted Ambassador Kvar of the Karawala Empire, his scaled face rippling with barely contained anger. The ancient reptilian diplomat towered over most of the assembly, his ceremonial armor glinting under the emergency lights that had activated to compensate for the power loss. This incident merely confirms what many of us have long suspected, Ambassador Volkov. Humanity advances its technologies with reckless abandon, with little regard for established protocols or the comfort of other species. General Marcus Thorne, Earth's security advisor and Talia's closest confidant on the station, stepped closer to her side. His weathered face remained impassive, but she could sense his frustration. They had fought this battle too many times in the 5 cycles since Earth had joined the Concord. The protocols were followed, Ambassador Kvar, Thorne said, his deep voice carrying across the now silent hall. Your objection is noted, but I must remind the Assembly that humanity has complied with every regulation imposed since our admission. A murmur rippled through the gathered diplomats. It wasn't entirely true, Talia knew. Humanity had pushed boundaries, bent rules, sought exceptions, all in the name of integration and progress. But they had tried. Despite the resistance, despite the thinly veiled contempt from elder species like the KRYLL, despite the countless cultural misunderstandings, Earth had genuinely attempted to become a contributing member of the galactic community. The Xylosian journalist Lyra Zanne approached, her slender humanoid form moving gracefully through the crowd. The faint blue luminescence of her skin provided additional illumination in the dim hall. Ambassador Volkov, she said, her voice carrying the melodic quality characteristic of her species, would you care to make an official statement for the Cosmic Chronicle about this unfortunate timing? Talia recognized the lifeline Lyra was offering. The journalist had shown a rare openness to humanity's perspective since their arrival. The United Earth delegation extends its sincere apologies for the disruption, Talia began, ensuring her voice would carry to the recording devices. The power fluctuation was an unintended consequence of an approved research project. We are working with station engineers to restore full functionality and will, of course, review our experimental protocols. Kvar made a dismissive gesture with his upper limb, the equivalent of a contemptuous snort. Always apologies after the fact. Never caution before. The Supreme Council will discuss this incident at tomorrow's session. As the reptilian ambassador moved away, trailed by his entourage and supporters, Thorne leaned close to Talia. That wasn't a threat, he whispered. That was a promise. I know, she replied, maintaining her diplomatic smile. But the power's already returning. By tomorrow, this will be forgotten. Thorne's expression darkened. They never forget, Talia. They just add it to the list. After the dignitaries had dispersed, Lyra approached them again, this time with her recording devices deactivated. You should know, the journalist said quietly. Kvar was meeting with representatives from 7 other delegations before the ceremony. The conversation ended when I approached, but I caught phrases about reassessment of compatibility and procedural review of admission criteria. Talia felt her stomach tighten. Those were bureaucratic euphemisms used when the Concord was considering disciplinary action against a member species. Thank you, Lyra, she said, genuinely grateful. Any idea which delegations? The usual conservative bloc plus, Lyra hesitated, plus the Sylvan Union, which is unusual. They've been neutral regarding humanity until now. Ambassador Lorien attended? Thorne asked sharply. The plant-based Sylvans were considered moderate voices in Concord politics. Lyra nodded, the bioluminescent fronds that serve as her hair dimming slightly in what Talia recognized as concern. "Be careful," the journalist advised. "I'm trying to maintain journalistic neutrality, but—" Her voice dropped even lower. "There's something orchestrated about this reaction. The power failure affected primarily environmental systems in areas occupied by species with particular sensitivities to disruption. It's almost as if someone knew exactly where our experiment would impact." Thorne finished, his military mind immediately grasping the implication. "I'm not suggesting sabotage," Lyra said quickly. "Just convenient timing." After Lyra departed, Talia and Thorne walked in silence toward the Earth delegation's quarters, situated in one of the newer sections of the massive station. Unlike the ancient, ornate chambers allocated to founding members like the KRYLL, humanity's accommodations were functional, minimalist, and located far from the station's power core, a physical reminder of their provisional status. "They set us up," Thorne said once they were safely behind closed doors. "We don't know that," Talia countered, though her conviction was wavering. "Open your eyes, Ambassador," Thorne said, reverting to her title as he always did when frustrated with her optimism. 5 cycles of jumping through hoops, accepting second-rate treatment, smiling through thinly veiled insults, and we're still the troublesome newcomers. The Varaxians were accepted after only 3 cycles of probationary membership, and they once used biological weapons in their intraspecies conflicts. The Varaxians had the backing of the KRYLL, Talia reminded him, removing her formal diplomatic sash and collapsing into a chair. "We joined without a sponsor." "Exactly my point. The deck is stacked, Talia. It always has been." She sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. At 36, she was considered remarkably young for an ambassador, especially to such a prestigious post. But Earth's rapid advancement in faster-than-light travel had outpaced their diplomatic infrastructure. When the opportunity to join the Concord arose 2 centuries after humanity's first FTL journey, the United Earth government had sent their brightest, not their most experienced. "So what would you have me do, Marcus? Give up? Tell Earth that the galaxy doesn't want us at the table?" Thorne's stern expression softened slightly. "No, but I would have you prepare for the worst. Kvar's been building a coalition against us since our arrival. This incident will give him the leverage he needs to make a move. Then we counter it," Talia said, determination replacing her momentary despair. "We find allies. We demonstrate value. We show them why excluding humanity would be a mistake." Thorne nodded, though his eyes remained skeptical. "I'll increase surveillance on Kvar's movements. If he's planning something, we need to know before it happens. Discreetly, Marcus. The last thing we need is to be accused of espionage." "Of course, Ambassador," he replied with a rare smile. "Discretion is my middle name. I thought it was Jefferson." "That too." The following days confirmed their worst fears. Information began to spread throughout Concord Station, subtle at first, then increasingly blatant. Reports of past human incidents resurfaced in the station's information network. A diplomatic faux pas during first contact with the methane-breathing Halorians, an Earth vessel that had accidentally violated a sacred space zone. Cultural misunderstandings with a collective consciousness Mycerians. Each incident, minor and resolved at the time, was now portrayed as part of a pattern of reckless, irresponsible behavior by a species unprepared for galactic citizenship. Talia found herself increasingly isolated in diplomatic circles. Conversations would stop when she entered rooms. Invitations to cultural exchanges and informal gatherings dwindled. Even species that had previously been friendly became distant, unwilling to be seen associating too closely with Earth's representative. Lyra continued to provide what information she could, though her position at the Cosmic Chronicle became precarious as her editors pushed for more balanced coverage of what was now being called the human question. "They've buried my investigation into the power failure," she told Talia during a clandestine meeting in the station's arboretum, designed to mimic Earth's deciduous forests. I found maintenance records showing system vulnerabilities that shouldn't have been affected by your experiment. When I tried to publish, my editor cited ongoing security reviews that required postponement. They're controlling the narrative, Talia said, watching a simulated leaf spiral down from an artificial maple tree, creating the justification for whatever comes next. Yes, but for what exactly? Sanctions? Restrictions? Something worse, I fear, Talia admitted. General Thorne has intercepted communications suggesting Kvar is pushing for a full assembly vote. Lyra's bioluminescence dimmed dramatically. On Earth's membership status? That would be unprecedented for such a new admission. Precisely why it would succeed, Talia said bitterly. There's no established procedure for defending against such a motion. We'd be fighting blind, without knowing the rules. That evening, Thorne brought confirmation. His network of security personnel and the few allies they had maintained had intercepted a coded transmission from Kvar to members of the Supreme Council. The vote would be called in 3 station days, barely enough time to prepare a defense. He's claiming extraordinary circumstances based on a risk assessment that classifies humanity as a destabilizing presence, Thorne reported, his voice tight with controlled anger. The motion will recommend temporary suspension of membership and mandatory withdrawal from Concord space for a period of cultural and technological realignment. Exile, Talia translated. They're voting to exile Earth. That's the diplomatic term. The enforcement protocols attached to the proposal are essentially expulsion at gunpoint if we don't comply voluntarily. Talia paced their meeting room, mind racing through options. We need to address the assembly directly, present our case. There must be species willing to stand with us, or at least abstain. I've been running probability scenarios, Thorne said, displaying a holographic projection of the Concord's voting blocks. Best case, we get 30% opposition to the motion, maybe another 15% abstention. It's not enough, Talia. Not with Kvar's coalition pushing this hard. The Sylvans, Talia said suddenly. Lyra mentioned they've joined Kvar's meetings, but they've always favored integration and diversity. If I could speak with Ambassador Lorien directly, Thor nodded. It's worth trying, but we also need to prepare Earth for the outcome. The government needs to know what's coming. I'll draft a preliminary warning, but let's not cause panic yet. If we can sway enough votes. Be realistic, Thorne interrupted gently. We need to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. That's not pessimism, it's strategy. The meeting with Ambassador Lorien occurred in one of the Sylvan environmental chambers, a lush, humid greenhouse where the plant-based diplomat could remain partially rooted during discussions. The ambassador's humanoid upper body emerged from a specialized nutrient basin, while communication tendrils waved gently around what passed for a face, a smooth green surface with sensory organs arranged in a pattern humans found disconcertingly asymmetrical. I appreciate you meeting with me, Ambassador, Talia began. Curiosity compelled acceptance. Lorien responded in the Sylvan's characteristic direct syntax. Human desperation noted. Unusual. We are facing an unjust process, Talia explained. The vote Kvar has called. Process follows regulations. Lorien interrupted. Unusual, but permitted. The process may be legal, but it's being driven by prejudice, not facts, Talia pressed. Humanity has contributed technological innovations, cultural exchanges, trade opportunities. Contributions acknowledged. Disruptions also acknowledged. The ambassador's tendrils shifted in what Talia had learned was a sign of conflicted thinking. Query. Why do humans advance so rapidly? Observation. 200 years from first faster-than-light travel to Concord membership. Comparison. Average species development timeline, 1,500 years minimum. Talia recognized the opening. That's precisely why we're valuable to the Concord. Human adaptability, our capacity for innovation under pressure. These are assets in a galaxy that faces unknown threats. Or creates threats, Lorien countered. Kvar's primary argument. Humans unpredictable, potentially dangerous because of development speed. Evidence compelling. Evidence manipulated, Talia insisted. Ambassador, the Sylvan philosophy has always embraced diversity of growth patterns. Some plants shoot up quickly, others grow slowly but live for centuries. Both have their place in the ecosystem. The botanical diplomat was silent for several moments, tendrils undulating in contemplation. Analogy has merit, Lorien finally admitted. We'll consider Earth's position. Cannot promise Sylvan support, but will advocate for process fairness. Kvar's haste. Concerning. It wasn't the alliance Talia had hoped for, but it was something, perhaps enough to convince other moderates to reconsider their positions. The day of the vote arrived with an atmosphere of tension permeating the station. The Grand Assembly Chamber, a vast hemispherical space with concentric rings of delegation platforms, was filled to capacity. Species of all forms, humanoid, insectoid, gaseous, crystalline, collective, and more exotic morphologies, occupied their designated areas. At the center, the Supreme Council members sat on elevated platforms, with Kvar's imposing figure dominating the visual field. Talia took her position. On Earth's platform, a deliberately peripheral location that required her to project her voice more forcefully to be heard. Thorn stood beside her, his military posture rigid, dress uniform impeccable. They had agreed he would remain silent unless security matters were directly addressed. This was a diplomatic battlefield. The Supreme Council recognizes the emergency session called by Ambassador Kvar of the KRYLL Empire, announced the Concord moderator, a theoretically neutral functionary from one of the founding species. Kvar rose, his scaled form towering over the central podium. Esteemed members of the Galactic Concord, he began, his voice resonant with practiced authority, we face a question today that strikes at the very foundation of our millennium-long peace. In admitting new species to our covenant, we accept certain risks. The risk of cultural misunderstanding, of technological incompatibility, of diplomatic friction. These are necessary challenges for a diverse union. He paused, surveying the chamber. But there is a line between acceptable growing pains and fundamental incompatibility. It is my solemn duty to inform this assembly that humanity has demonstrated repeatedly and conclusively that they fall into the latter category. For the next 30 minutes, Kvar presented a meticulously constructed case against Earth. He highlighted every incident, exaggerated every misunderstanding, and implied sinister motives behind every human innovation. The power failure during the Millennium Celebration featured prominently, portrayed as evidence of reckless experimentation and disregard for communal safety. We must ask ourselves, Kvar concluded, whether we can afford to wait until a more serious incident occurs. The pattern is clear, the trajectory concerning. I therefore move that the Concord temporarily suspend Earth's membership and require human withdrawal from Concord space for a period of realignment and reflection, for their benefit as much as our security. Murmurs filled the chamber as Kvar resumed his seat, his expression one of solemn regret, masking obvious satisfaction. The Supreme Council recognizes Ambassador Volkov of Earth, the moderator announced. Talia rose, acutely aware of hundreds of alien eyes, sensory organs, and perception mechanisms focused on her. She had prepared extensively, yet in this moment, facing the weight of a 1,000-year-old institution poised to reject her species, words seemed inadequate. Distinguished representatives, she began, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. I stand before you not simply as Earth's ambassador, but as a witness to a profound miscarriage of justice. The case presented by Ambassador Kvar is not merely flawed. It is deliberately constructed to mislead. She activated her data terminal, projecting evidence that Thorn had helped compile. These are the actual incident reports from each event cited, showing resolutions, corrective actions, and acknowledgement from the affected parties. In every case, Earth took responsibility, made amends, and implemented changes to prevent recurrence. Talia moved to more aggressive footing. What Ambassador Kvar failed to mention is that the power disruption during the Millennium Celebration affected systems that should have been isolated from our experiment. Station logs, which my delegation had difficulty accessing until recently, show unauthorized modifications to critical junctions prior to our approved test. A wave of murmurs spread through the assembly. Furthermore, Talia continued, I have evidence of a coordinated campaign to isolate and discredit Earth's delegation over the past station cycle, selective information distribution, manipulated cultural contexts, and strategic exaggeration of minor incidents. At that moment, the Chamber's information screens simultaneously displayed a comprehensive investigative report authored by Lyra Xantha. The article her editors had suppressed, now released to every delegation simultaneously. The timing was perfect, a prearranged signal that the journalist had managed to execute despite increasing restrictions on her activities. This independent journalism confirms what I have described, Talia said, seizing the moment of confusion. The question before us is not whether humanity belongs in the Concord, but whether the Concord will remain true to its founding principles of fairness, growth, and mutual respect, or succumb to fear and prejudice. Kvar stood immediately, his scales flushing with anger. This is outrageous. The human ambassador makes baseless accusations of conspiracy while using unauthorized information distribution to disrupt proper procedure. Ironic, isn't it? Talia replied evenly. When we use your tactics, they become outrageous. The chamber erupted in voices, some supporting Kvar's objection, others calling for a review of the evidence. The moderator struggled to restore order. Silence. The command came not from the moderator, but from Ambassador Lorien, whose communication had been amplified through the Sylvan delegation sound system. All eyes turned to the plant-based diplomat. Process observation. Accusations serious for both sides. Proper investigation required before vote. Motion to postpone. Kvar's response was immediate and calculated. While I appreciate the Sylvan concern for process, the evidence of human incompatibility is overwhelming regardless of context. If anything, this disruptive display reinforces my point. He turned to address the full assembly directly. I call for an immediate vote, as is my right under emergency session protocols. The moderator, after conferring briefly with procedural advisors, nodded reluctantly. The motion is properly before the assembly. We will proceed to a vote on the temporary suspension of Earth's membership and the requirement of human withdrawal from Concord space. Talia felt a cold numbness spreading through her body as the voting commenced. Delegation after delegation registered their positions on the central tally. Despite her efforts, despite Lyra's exposé, despite Ambassador Lorien's intervention, the outcome was becoming clear. The galaxy had already decided. As the final votes were recorded, the result displayed across the Chamber's information systems. 68% in favor, 22% opposed, 10% abstention. The motion had passed by a substantial margin. The Assembly has spoken, the moderator announced with formal solemnity. Earth's membership is suspended, effective immediately. Human presence in Concord space is to be reduced to essential diplomatic personnel within one standard cycle, with complete withdrawal to be completed within 3 cycles. Talia stood perfectly still, absorbing the finality of the moment. She felt Thorn's hand on her shoulder, a rare physical gesture of support. Her communication device vibrated with an encrypted message from Earth. Emergency instructions received moments before. Kvar approached the central podium again, his posture radiating satisfaction barely masked by formal regret. I wish to emphasize that this action is not taken lightly or with malice. We sincerely hope that humanity will use this period of separation to address the concerns raised and eventually return to Ambassador Kvar, Talia interrupted, stepping forward. The abruptness of her movement and the clarity of her voice silenced the chamber once more. The galaxy has voted to exile Earth. We acknowledge your decision. She straightened her shoulders, her expression shifting from diplomatic neutrality to resolute determination. However, humanity will not wait to be asked twice. Earth voluntarily withdraws from the Galactic Concord, effective immediately. We will determine for ourselves if and when we might return. Gasps and exclamations rippled through the assembly. Kvar's scales rippled in surprise. This was not the response he had anticipated. Ambassador Volkov, the moderator, interjected. The protocols for withdrawal require certification and... The protocols, Talia said firmly, no longer apply to us. We are not suspended members awaiting readmission. We are a sovereign species choosing our own path. She turned to address the entire chamber one final time. Remember this moment, distinguished representatives. Remember that when offered friendship, you chose fear. When presented with diversity, you demanded conformity. When given the opportunity to evolve, you retreated to the familiar. Talia removed her official ambassador's insignia and placed it on the podium. The Earth delegation departs. Not in 3 cycles, not in 1 cycle, but now. This is not a negotiation or a threat. It is simply a fact. With that, she turned and walked toward the exit, Thorn at her side. Behind them, the chamber erupted into chaos, but they did not look back. Within hours, a carefully orchestrated exodus began. Human ships throughout Concord space simultaneously initiated departure protocols. Businesses closed, research projects were packed up, and citizens boarded transport vessels with efficiency that suggested extensive prior planning. The speed and coordination of the withdrawal shocked Concord officials, who had expected resistance, negotiation, or at least a gradual compliance. As Talia and Thorn boarded the diplomatic vessel that would carry them back to Earth, Lyra Xantha approached the embarkation area. Her editor had suspended her for the unauthorized release of her investigation, but she had come nonetheless. I didn't expect this, the journalist admitted. None of US did. That was rather the point, Thorn said with a hint of satisfaction. What will humanity do now? Lyra asked. The resources, the trade networks, the knowledge exchange, you're giving up so much. Talia smiled, a genuine expression that contained both sadness and determination. We're not giving up, Lyra. We're stepping back to move forward on our own terms. Will you return? Eventually. That, Talia said, will depend on what we become in our absence, and what the Concord becomes in ours. As the last human vessel departed Concord Station, a curious calm settled over the galactic community. Many expected chaos from the hasty human withdrawal, disruptions to joint projects, or diplomatic protests. Instead, there was simply absence, complete and absolute withdrawal, as if humanity had decided that if they were not welcome at the table, they would build their own elsewhere. In the cycles that followed, the Concord continued its measured, deliberate existence. Kvar received commendations for preserving stability, though some privately questioned whether the human presence had truly threatened anything other than complacency. Lyra Xantha's career slowly recovered as the controversy faded, though she continued to write occasional pieces speculating about humanity's activities beyond Concord space. For most species, life continued unchanged. Earth had been a minor player, after all, a newcomer of little consequence in the grand scheme of a 1,000-year institution. The ripples of their departure quickly subsided into stillness. Or so it seemed. The 50 years following Earth's withdrawal from the galactic Concord transformed humanity in ways few could have imagined. The initial shock and anger at rejection gradually channeled into a singular, focused determination to ensure that humanity would never again be dependent on the acceptance or goodwill of others. In the immediate aftermath of their return, the United Earth government underwent a radical reorganization. The fragmented leadership that had characterized Earth's approach to galactic politics gave way to the formation of the United Earth Directorate, UED, a streamlined, purpose-driven administration that unified previously competing national interests. Talia Volkov, once merely an ambassador, rose to become Earth's Secretary of Interstellar Affairs, a position created specifically to oversee humanity's new trajectory. General Marcus Thorn, his earlier caution vindicated, was appointed Supreme Commander of the newly established United Earth Defense Fleet. Together, they implemented what came to be known as the Volkov-Thorn Doctrine: self-sufficiency, rapid advancement, and strategic obscurity. Our greatest advantage, Talia often said in closed sessions, is that they no longer watch us. What the Concorde doesn't observe, it cannot fear or constrain. The Directorate focused humanity's considerable resources and innovative capacity on several key initiatives. Colonial expansion accelerated dramatically, with settlement ships venturing into unexplored regions well beyond Concorde space. These weren't mere outposts, but carefully planned, self-sustaining colonies with specific research and development mandates. On Earth and throughout human space, education systems were redesigned to emphasize cross-disciplinary innovation and collaborative problem-solving. The remnants of national competition faded as humanity embraced a shared purpose. Children born after the withdrawal grew up with a unifying narrative. The stars were humanity's birthright, and they would claim them on their own terms. The most transformative development, however, came from an unexpected source. Dr. Eleanor Chun, a temporal physicist who had been part of the ill-fated experiment that triggered the power failure on Concorde Station, made a breakthrough that would redefine humanity's relationship with progress itself. The power fluctuation wasn't a failure, she explained to Talia and Thorne during a classified briefing 5 years into the withdrawal. It was the first manifestation of a temporal distortion field, what we now call a localized temporal bubble. Her team had refined the technology to create controlled environments where time flowed at significantly accelerated rates relative to the outside universe. Within these bubbles, research and development could progress at factors of 5, 10, eventually 50 times normal speed. A day outside is a year within, Dr. Chun explained as she led them through the first LTB facility, a massive complex buried beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. We're careful to limit human exposure. No one lives permanently inside the bubbles. Research teams rotate on strict schedules to prevent temporal dissonance syndrome. But our projects, they advance at rates that would terrify the Concorde. The implications were staggering. Earth could compress centuries of development into decades. The technology was implemented with careful precision at key research installations throughout human space, creating islands of accelerated progress while maintaining a stable temporal environment for the broader population. This is exactly what Kfar feared, Thorne observed after witnessing the facility's capabilities. Humanity advancing too quickly, becoming unpredictable. No, Talia corrected him. This is what Kfar should have feared. Not the humans he knew, but the humans we would become when pushed to our full potential. The LTB technology remained humanity's most closely guarded secret, but its effects gradually became apparent in every aspect of society. Energy production achieved practical fusion efficiency, then moved beyond to exotic matter conversion. Computational systems evolved from traditional quantum architectures to photonic neural networks and eventually to crystalline consciousness interfaces. Most significantly, the UED defense fleet underwent a metamorphosis. The modest security force that had accompanied Earth's delegation to Concorde Station evolved into a formidable armada, incorporating technologies that seamlessly integrated human intuition with machine precision. The fleet expanded under Thorne's guidance, not as a tool of conquest, but as the ultimate insurance policy against external threats. We build strength not to dominate, Thorne would remind his officers, but to ensure we can never again be dominated. Throughout this transformation, humanity maintained complete radio silence with Concorde space. No diplomatic overtures, no trade proposals, no cultural exchanges. Earth had withdrawn entirely, focusing inward and outward simultaneously. Inward towards self-improvement, outward toward the unexplored frontier, but never back toward the civilization that had rejected them. Lyra Zantha, now a senior analyst for the Cosmic Chronicle, published a series of speculative pieces on humanity's absence titled The Silent Exodus: What Becomes of Earth? In her final article of the series, she posed a question that resonated throughout the Concorde. In our haste to remove a perceived disruption, have we inadvertently created a greater unknown? The silence from human space speaks volumes, but what exactly is it saying? The question remained unanswered as the Concorde's attention gradually shifted to more immediate concerns. The stability Kvar had promised in humanity's absence proved more fragile than anticipated. Without Earth's buffer zone on the western spiral arm, piracy increased along former human trade routes. Several minor territorial disputes between member species, previously mediated by human diplomats valued for their outsider perspective, escalated into diplomatic crises. More concerningly, scout ships reported increased activity from non-Concord civilizations at the galaxy's edges. The Void Pact, a loosely affiliated collection of aggressive species from the intergalactic void, had begun testing Concord boundaries with increasing frequency. Kvar, his political capital diminished by these developments, but still influential, dismissed the reports as exaggerated. Border incursions have always occurred, he assured the Supreme Council. Our established protocols are sufficient. But as years became decades, the incursions grew bolder. Concord response fleets, designed for ceremonial display and minor peacekeeping, found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned in several skirmishes. The comfortable consensus that had defined Concord politics for a millennium began to fracture under external pressure. And still, from human space, there came only silence. Until the day everything changed. The emergency klaxons of Concord Station wailed with an urgency not heard in generations. In the Central Command Center, representatives from the Security Council stared in disbelief at the holographic display showing the unfolding crisis. A Void Pact battle group, not a mere scouting force but a full invasion fleet, had bypassed the outer sensor network and penetrated deep into Concord space. They had already overwhelmed 3 monitoring outposts and were on a direct course for the Sylvan Homeworld System, one of the Concord's primary agricultural centers. How did they get past our early warning systems? Demanded Counselor Telex, the Mycelian Collective security representative. Kvar, now elder statesman of the KRYLL after stepping down as ambassador, leaned heavily on his ceremonial staff. Age had dulled his scales, but not his authoritative presence. The pattern suggests they've been mapping our sensor coverage for years, finding the blind spots. Theoretical discussions are irrelevant. Ambassador Lorien interrupted, the normally measured Sylvan's communication tendrils vibrating with alarm. Response fleet status required immediately. The fleet commander, a cautious halicted strategist, manipulated the tactical display. We've mobilized all available vessels within response range. They will intercept here at the Cerulean Passage, a region of space highlighted on the map, a natural bottleneck between nebula fields. But I must emphasize our tactical assessment. The Void Pact force outguns our response fleet by approximately 3-1. A heavy silence fell over the command center. Evacuation protocols for the Sylvan system must begin immediately, Kvar finally said, his voice carrying the weight of a millennium of peace about to end. Unnecessary, came a voice from the entrance. All eyes turned to see a human woman standing in the doorway. She was elderly but stood straight, her white hair cropped short, her eyes sharp and evaluating. Despite the 50 years that had passed, Kvar recognized her immediately. Ambassador Volkov, he said, unable to keep the shock from his voice. Secretary Volkov, actually, Talia corrected, walking calmly into the center of the room. United Earth Directorate. We received your distress signal. We sent no distress signal, the fleet commander said, mandibles clicking in confusion. Not intentionally, perhaps, Talia acknowledged with a thin smile. But we've maintained observation posts at the edge of Concord space. We detected the Void Pact fleet's movement 3 days ago. Then you know we face invasion, Kvar said. Have you come merely to witness our crisis, or does Earth offer assistance after 50 years of silence? Before Talia could answer, the tactical officer called out, new contact, massive energy signature emerging from the Polaris drift. The holographic display shifted to show a spatial anomaly forming at the edge of the mapped region, a swirling distortion that rapidly stabilized into a structured portal. Through this artificial gateway emerged a vessel unlike anything the Concord had ever encountered. Sleek and immense, its hull composed of materials that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. It moved with a precision that defied its scale. Then another appeared, and another, and 5 more. "Identify yourselves," the fleet commander demanded through the open communication channel. A deep, weathered voice responded as a new holographic projection appeared in the command center. An elderly human male, wearing a uniform adorned with symbols of rank unfamiliar to the Concord representatives. "Admiral Marcus Thorne, United Earth Defense Fleet. We are here to address the Void Pact incursion. Please withdraw your vessels from the engagement zone. For step forward. This is Concord space. By what authority do you issue commands to our fleet?" Thorne's expression remained impassive. "By the authority of superior capability and immediate necessity. The Void Pact force will reach your defensive line in 43 minutes. They will break through in less than 20 minutes of engagement. We can prevent this, but our tactical systems require a clear operational theater." "This is outrageous," Kvar began, but Lorien interrupted. "Tactical assessment accurate," the Sylvan acknowledged. "Pride superseded by survival. Withdraw our vessels, Commander." After a moment of tense silence, the fleet commander nodded. "Concord vessels will pull back to secondary defensive positions." What followed was displayed in real time on the command center's holographic system. A demonstration of military technology so advanced it bordered on incomprehensible to the watching Concord representatives. The UED fleet didn't simply engage the Void Pact vessels. They systematically dismantled them. Directed energy weapons cut through advanced shields with surgical precision. Drone swarms neutralized weapon systems without destroying the ships carrying them. Most remarkably, localized space-time distortions trapped several enemy vessels in temporal stasis fields, freezing them in mid-maneuver. Within 17 minutes, the Void Pact invasion force, the greatest threat the Concord had faced in centuries, had been neutralized. Not destroyed, but thoroughly defeated, with minimal casualties on either side. Admiral Thorne's holographic image addressed the stunned command center again. "The Void Pact vessels have been secured. Their weapon and propulsion systems are disabled. We're transmitting coordinates where you can take custody of the crews." "This is unprecedented," Kvar said, his earlier hostility replaced by wary respect. "The Concord owes humanity a debt." "The Concord owes us nothing," Talia replied firmly. "We acted to prevent destabilization of the galactic region, which serves our interests as well as yours. However, this incident demonstrates the need for a new relationship between Earth and the Concord." "You wish to rejoin?" Kvar asked cautiously. Talia allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. "No, Elder Kvar. We wish to negotiate a cooperation agreement between equals. The United Earth Directorate is not seeking membership in your organization. We are proposing a strategic partnership with clearly defined parameters." Kvar and the other representatives exchanged glances. This was not the reunion they had expected. "Perhaps," Ambassador Lorien suggested, "communication tendrils forming patterns indicating thoughtful consideration, full council assembly appropriate for such discussion." "We anticipated as much," Talia said. "A diplomatic vessel will dock with Concord Station within the hour. Admiral Thorne and I will present our proposal to your Supreme Council." The council chamber, when they assembled, was filled beyond capacity. Word of the human intervention and the astounding technology they had displayed had spread throughout the station. Species that had barely remembered Earth now clamored for information about the transformed humanity. Talia and Thorne, accompanied by a small delegation of UED officials, entered the chamber with measured confidence. They looked not like supplicants returning to the fold, but representatives of a power secure in its position. Kvar, taking a seat among the KRYLL delegation rather than on the Supreme Council platform he had once dominated, watched them with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. The humans had changed in ways he had not anticipated. He had expected them to return eventually, humbled, perhaps, or aggressive, seeking retribution. But this poised, measured confidence was something else entirely. The Concord moderator, a different individual than the one who had overseen Earth's expulsion 50 years prior, called the session to order. We recognize Secretary Volkov of the United Earth Directorate. Talia took the central position, her posture straight despite her advanced age. Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Concord, I come before you not to revisit past decisions or grievances, but to address our shared future. She activated a holographic display that expanded to show a map of the galaxy with clearly defined regions. For 50 years, humanity has developed independently, expanding into regions beyond Concord space. We have established 17 major colony worlds, developed technologies suited to our needs, and created a society focused on self-determination. The display shifted to show the recent battle, presented as analytical data rather than visceral imagery. Today's incident with the Void Pact demonstrates that despite our separation, our security concerns remain interconnected. This is the reality of sharing a galaxy, regardless of political boundaries. Talia continued with remarkable directness. The United Earth Directorate proposes a mutual security and development treaty between our civilization and yours. Not integration, not subordination in either direction, but cooperation between distinct entities with shared interests. The specifics of the proposal unfurled across the Chamber's information systems, clearly prepared well in advance. It outlined cooperation in security matters, limited technology exchange, defined trade parameters, and strict protocols for cultural interaction. Most notably, it established buffer zones and non-interference principles that would preserve humanity's independence while creating mechanisms for coordinated response to external threats. This proposal represents our position, Talia concluded. We are prepared to discuss modifications, but the core principles are non-negotiable. Earth will not rejoin the Concord. We will, however, consider you allies if you choose to accept our terms. The chamber erupted in voices, some outraged at the perceived audacity, others practical in their assessment of the demonstrated human capabilities, many simply overwhelmed by the reversal of the power dynamic they had taken for granted. Ambassador Lorien was the first to speak officially in response. Proposal contains practical measures. Necessity acknowledged. Question: why now? Human silence maintained for 50 cycles. Timing significant. Admiral Thorne stepped forward to address this question. Our intelligence networks have tracked the Void Pact's expansion for over 20 years. Today's incursion was not an isolated incident, but the beginning of a calculated campaign. They've been testing your defenses, analyzing response patterns, and identifying vulnerabilities. The invasion force we neutralized today was merely the vanguard. He activated his own tactical display, showing movement patterns across the intergalactic void. Their main fleet is mobilizing. You have perhaps 2 years before they launch a full-scale assault. Alone, the Concord cannot withstand it. The choice before you is not whether to accept Earth as an equal, but whether to survive what's coming. This revelation sent a new wave of concern through the assembly. Kvar, after conferring briefly with the current KRYLL ambassador, approached a speaking platform. The evidence appears compelling, he acknowledged, his voice carrying the weight of his years. And today's demonstration of Earth's advancements speaks for itself. He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. I find myself in the unexpected position of supporting consideration of Secretary Volkov's proposal. A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber. 50 cycles ago, Kvar continued, I argued that humanity's rapid advancement posed a risk to Concord stability. I now recognize that perhaps what I feared was not danger, but change itself. The Concord stability has become stagnation, while Earth's exile became transformation. He looked directly at Talia. We voted to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be asked twice, and it seems we are all the better for it. The formal negotiations took 3 intense days, during which the UD delegation remained aboard their vessel rather than accepting accommodations on the station. A subtle but clear statement about their autonomous status. Lyra Xantha, now editor-in-chief of the Cosmic Chronicle and moving with the assistance of a hovering mobility platform, secured the first interview with Talia. "Did you plan this?" the journalist asked once recording began. "All those years ago, when you walked out of the chamber, was this the outcome you envisioned?" Talia smiled. "Not specifically, no. We couldn't have predicted the Void Pack's emergence as a major threat, nor the exact technologies we would develop. But we understood something fundamental about humanity that the Concord missed, which was that we thrive under pressure. That exclusion would unite us as inclusion never could. That given space to develop on our own terms, we would exceed everyone's expectations, including our own." Lyra's bioluminescence flickered with what Talia recognized as skepticism. "And the timing of your return? The fleet that just happened to be positioned to intervene at the critical moment?" "Let's say we've been paying attention," Talia replied diplomatically. "The Directorate maintains observation posts throughout the galaxy. We've been aware of the Void Pack's movements for some time. Yet you waited until the Concord was facing imminent defeat before revealing yourselves." Talia's expression hardened slightly. "We waited until we could engage from a position of undeniable strength. Until the value of partnership with humanity would be self-evident even to those who once voted to cast us out." "You wanted them to need you," Lyra observed. "We wanted them to respect us," Talia corrected. "Need is transient. Respect endures." When the treaty was finally ratified, it established a new paradigm in galactic politics. The United Earth Directorate and the Galactic Concord became parallel powers, not merged, not subordinate to each other, but aligned in specific areas of mutual concern. Human technology revitalized stagnant Concord systems. Concord diplomatic experience helped humanity navigate complex interspecies relations. Together, they began preparations for the greater conflict that Thorne's intelligence suggested was approaching. As Talia and Thorne departed Concord Station at the conclusion of the negotiations, they stood on the observation deck of their vessel, watching the massive structure recede into the distance. "Did you ever imagine we'd return like this?" Thorne asked, his voice reflective. "Not in the details," Talia admitted, "but I always believed humanity would find its own path." "They fear us now," Thorne observed, "perhaps more than they did before." "Yes," Talia acknowledged, "but they respect us too. Fear alone breeds resentment. Fear with respect builds lasting alliances. And when the Void Pact is defeated, what then?" Talia turned from the viewport to face her old friend. "Then we continue becoming who we were always meant to be, not defined by rejection or acceptance, but by our own determination to shape our destiny." The diplomatic vessel accelerated away from the station, its advanced drive creating a shimmering distortion in space-time, a visual reminder of how far humanity had come in the decades of their self-imposed exile, and a promise of how much further they might go. In the star-filled silence of space, the truth hung unspoken between them. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth. Humanity hadn't waited to be asked twice, and the universe would never be the same again.